Hello and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I'm Meher Sher and these are the headlines. Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan says linking terrorism with Islam is the biggest injustice being done to Muslims. He was speaking at the 14th summit of the Economic Cooperation Organization via video link. Referring to India, Khan said COVID lockdowns are being used to suppress Muslims in occupied territories. He expressed hope that intra-Afghan talks will lead to durable peace in Afghanistan. The Western powers have scrapped a U.S. plan for the UN nuclear watchdog to pass an anti-Iran resolution for lack of cooperation. Diplomats say IAEA chief Rafael Grossi has told its board of governors that the agency plans to hold technical talks with Iran in April. Meanwhile, Washington says Tehran has been given another chance to address the IAEA's concerns on uranium particles. Myanmar police have broken up anti-coup demonstrations in several cities with tear gas and gunfire. It comes after 38 people were killed in the most violent day of unrest since last month's military coup. The protesters were demanding the release of ousted leader Aung San Suu Kyi and restoration of democracy. The number of global COVID-19 infections has surpassed 115 million with more than 2.55 million deaths. Brazil has reported over 1,900 coronavirus fatalities as the country's death toll is nearing 160,000. In Pakistan, more than 1,500 people tested positive for the virus and 64 died overnight, with the death toll reaching 13,076. And in cricket, Pakistan Cricket Board has postponed the 6th edition of Pakistan Super League due to rising COVID-19 cases in players and officials. The PCB said the decision was made after a meeting with the team owners, considering the health and well-being of all participants. A total of 14 matches had been played in the tournament that was held at the National Stadium, Karachi. Well, those were the headlines. More news in detail after a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. And now for the news in more detail. Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan says linking terrorism with Islam is the biggest injustice which is being done to Muslims. He was speaking at the 14th summit of the Economic Cooperation Organization via video link. Referring to India, Khan said COVID lockdowns are being used to suppress Muslims in occupied territories. Khan said the pandemic has severely affected the economy of ECO states. He proposed 5-point plans to provide developing countries the fiscal space to recover from the coronavirus pandemic. The Prime Minister also expressed hope that intra-Afghan talks will lead to durable peace in Afghanistan. The U.S. says its special envoy, Zalmay Khalilzad, has held productive talks with the stakeholders of the Afghan peace process. State Department spokesperson Ned Price says the violence levels in Afghanistan are unacceptably high. Price's statement comes after Khalilzad wrapped up his 3-day visit in Kabul. Khalilzad had held meetings with Afghan leaders, activists, and other influential political figures. The U.S. envoy is set to depart for Doha, where he will discuss Afghan peace with the Taliban. Moving on, a doctor has been killed in an IED explosion in Afghanistan's Nangarhar province. Dr. Sadaf was working for the maternity ward of a public hospital. The provincial governor's office said the blast targeted a rickshaw the woman was traveling on in Jalalabad. There was no immediate claim of responsibility for the attack. This comes 2 days after 3 female TV journalists were killed by unknown men in the same city. The attack was later claimed by the ISIS militant group. And British lawmakers are set to debate the threat to press freedom and the safety of protesters in India next week. The House of Commons Petitions Committee confirmed this after an online petition crossed 100,000 signatures. In Delhi, a court has granted bail to 5 persons, including a high school student, in a case related to the Republic Day violence. The court said the accused cannot be kept in custody merely on the apprehension that they might again commit a similar offense. Since November 26th, farmers have been protesting on Delhi borders against the 3 controversial farm laws. More than 200 farmers have died in the ongoing agitation, including 5 who committed suicide. Now, a global nonprofit organization that works on digital rights says India is leading the world in internet shutdowns. In a report, Access Now said nearly 70% of global net outages in 2020 happened in India. The group says out of 155 instances of internet shutdown in India, 109 took place at the behest of the Modi government. The watchdog cited the blackout in Indian-occupied Jammu and Kashmir as an example. Access Now elaborated that India has been topping the global list for the last 3 years now. It urged the Modi government to ensure more transparency on how these shutdowns are enforced. Now, Yemen's Houthis say they have fired a missile at a Saudi Aramco facility in the Red Sea city of Jeddah. In a tweet, a Houthi military spokesperson called the attack a response to siege and aggression against Yemenis. Yahya Saraya said the rebels had struck their target without elaborating. The Saudi authorities have not commented on the claim yet. However, the Saudi-led coalition earlier said it had destroyed an armed Houthi drone launched at the southern Homs Mushayed city. The Houthis, Saraya said in a separate tweet that the attack targeted a military site in Homs Mushayed. Myanmar police have broken up anti-coup demonstrations in several cities with tear gas and gunfire. It comes after 38 people were killed on the most violent day of unrest since last month's military coup.
5 fighter jets made several low passes in a formation over the city of Mandalay. Aung San Suu Kyi's party says flags will fly at half-mast at its offices to commemorate the deaths. The protesters have been demanding the release of ousted leader Suu Kyi and restoration of democracy. UN Special Envoy on Myanmar, Christine Schreiner Bergener, said the death toll from the protests has risen to over 50. Bergener also warned that Myanmar's army may be going back to square one on the treatment of the Rohingya Muslims. She said the junta is following through on its intention to re-evaluate the work of the 2 commissions on the Rohingya. Diplomats said the UN Security Council is due to discuss Myanmar's situation on Friday in a closed meeting.
Meanwhile, Russia has dismissed U.S. calls to destroy its chemical weapons as baseless and illogical. The Kremlin said Moscow destroyed the weapons long ago in line with the Chemical Weapons Convention. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov said Washington should fulfill its obligations under the convention. Peskov added the statement appeared to be another U.S. attempt to hold Russia back. Earlier, Moscow clashed with European countries at the UN Security Council over a report from the global chemical weapons watchdog. The report blamed the Syrian Air Force for a series of attacks using sarin and chlorine on a rebel-held town in 2017. And at least 20 migrants have drowned off Djibouti after human smugglers pushed 80 people off the boat. In a tweet, the International Organization for Migration said the boat was on its way to Yemen. Regional Director for Africa, Mohammed Abdikar, said this is the 3rd such tragedy in less than 6 months. He said more than 70 lives have been lost in such incidents. Meanwhile, an IOM spokesperson said smugglers had judged that the boat was overloaded. Avon Nege said dozens of others thrown off the boat were also feared to have died. And the number of global coronavirus infections has crossed 115 million with more than 2.55 million deaths. Brazil has reported over 1,900 daily fatalities as the country's death toll approaches 160,000. More details on the pandemic in this report.
As the data on new coronavirus variants comes out, the results indicate highly distressing trends. Scientists believe that Brazil's rampant COVID-19 outbreak has become a global threat. A record spike in deaths for the second straight day forces Brazil's Sao Paulo state to impose more restrictions. The World Health Organization has also warned of a worrisome rise in cases after weeks of declining infections. Meanwhile, U.S. President Joe Biden says the decision to end the mask mandate in Texas and Mississippi states is a big mistake.
The last thing we need is the Neanderthal thinking that in the meantime everything's fine, take off your mask, forget it. It still matters. I carry a card with me, I don't have it, I put it on my desk. As of yesterday, we had lost 511,874 Americans.
Elsewhere, a landmark report reveals that countries with high obesity levels, such as the UK and the US, have the highest death rates from COVID-19. Greece has extended the lockdown to more areas until March 15 after a surge in new infections. Meanwhile, Germany has adopted a new plan for gradual relaxation of the country's long-running lockdown.
Und jetzt liegt die Aufgabe der Politik.
Politicians' task now is, and this is what we discussed during so many hours, to take the next steps wisely. They should be opening steps without setting ourselves back during this pandemic. There are many examples in Europe of a dramatic third wave, and this danger, and we shouldn't delude ourselves, also exists for us. We must always keep this in mind. Yet I can say that spring of 2021 will be different from the spring 1 year ago.
More published evidence shows the UK variant is likely to drive a large surge without faster vaccine drives and more shutdowns, and international police say security officials in China and South Africa have seized thousands of counterfeit vaccine doses.
Meanwhile, COVID-19 has claimed 64 more lives in Pakistan over the last 24 hours, taking the toll to 13,076. The health ministry reported 1,519 new infections overnight. It said the caseload has reached over 585,000. The ministry said more than 555,000 people have recovered so far. It added the number of active cases has reduced to just over 17,000. A little under 2,000 patients are currently being treated in hospitals for COVID-19. And Pakistan has announced to issue new smart cards to Afghan refugees in the country. In a statement, Pakistan's special representative to Afghanistan, Mohammad Sadiq, said the initiative will foster relationships. The process of issuing new smart cards will continue for 6 months. Sadiq said the National Data Authority will verify and update refugees' data during the time. He added the smart cards will authenticate the presence of refugees in Pakistan and enhance their protection. Pakistan is home to an estimated 3 million refugees, most of them Afghans fleeing war. Germany's ambassador to Pakistan, Bernhard Stefan Schlegel, hails Islamabad's efforts for peace in the region. He called on Army Chief General Qamar Javed Bajwa in the General Headquarters, Rawalpindi. The two exchanged views on regional security and the Afghan peace process. They also discussed matters of mutual interest. The Army chief lauded the 5th round of Pakistan-Germany strategic dialogue. He said Pakistan attaches great importance to its ties with Berlin. Pakistan Army's annual training exercise Zarb-e-Hadid is underway at military's Bahawalpur Corps Army's Media Wing. ISPR says the corps-level exercise is aimed at enhancing operational preparedness amongst components of forces. In a statement, it said the exercise area covers a vast expanse of desert and plains. The ISPR said troops from Bahawalpur Corps are rehearsing response measures under actual battlefield environment. It added participants have displayed a high level of professionalism during the tactical combat and firepower demonstration phases. We'll be back with more stories after a short break. Stay with us. We're back. The U.S. has hailed Germany's plan to sail a warship across the South China Sea. A State Department spokesperson called it support for a rules-based international order in the Indo-Pacific. She said the international community has a vital stake in the preservation of an open maritime order. Earlier, China said countries enjoyed the freedom of navigation and overflight in the South China Sea under international law. However, it added this must not be taken as an excuse to undermine Beijing's sovereignty and security. Meanwhile, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken reiterated the need to engage Beijing from a position of strength.
Our relationship with China will be competitive when it should be, collaborative when it can be, and adversarial when it must be. The common denominator is the need to engage China from a position of strength. That requires working with allies and partners, not denigrating them, because our combined weight is much harder for China to ignore.
President Joe Biden says the U.S. will make its judgments on a rocket attack in Iraq after identifying who was responsible. On Wednesday, a U.S. contractor died after 10 rockets hit an airbase housing the coalition troops in Anbar province. Talking to reporters in the Oval Office, Biden said Washington is following the incident through right now. He said only a contractor died in the attack, but he passed on due to a cardiac arrest. The Pentagon said the U.S. has shown it won't shy away from responding to attacks against its personnel when necessary. In a press briefing, Pentagon spokesperson John Kirby said Iraq will investigate the attack and the U.S. will see what they learned. He said if a response is warranted, the U.S. will act. The U.S. House of Representatives has canceled its planned Thursday session over threats of a possible attack on the Capitol. Authorities warned that an unidentified militia group could breach the building on March 4th. In a statement, the Capitol Police said it was prepared for any potential threats to Congress members and the complex. The police said it made significant security upgrades and increased manpower to ensure the protection of Congress. Earlier, the Department of Homeland Security and FBI issued a joint intelligence bulletin warning of potential violence. Moving on, the U.S. House of Representatives has approved a legislation aimed at preventing police misconduct. The bill is named after African-American George Floyd, whose killing by a policeman sparked the Black Lives Matter movement. The Democrats pushed the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act through the House by 220 to 212 vote. The House voted largely along party lines, with only one Republican voting in favor of the bill. The bill bans controversial police tactics and eases the way for lawsuits against officers violating constitutional rights. Democratic Representative Karen Bass drafted the legislation with House Judiciary Committee Chairman Gerald Nadler. New Zealand police say they have arrested 2 people following a threat against the mosques in Christchurch. Police said an online threat was made against the Al Noor Mosque and the Linwood Islamic Center. Canterbury District Commander Superintendent John Price said a 27-year-old man has been charged with threatening to kill. In a briefing, Price said the post was tipped off to police through their Crime Stoppers line. The official said the man is due to appear in Christchurch District Court on the 5th of March. New Zealand heightened alert ahead of the 2nd anniversary of the Christchurch attack on the 15th of March. Meanwhile, at least 8 people have been wounded in a knife attack in the town of Vetlanda in Sweden. The regional council said all victims were hospitalized and 3 of them have life-threatening injuries. The police said they are investigating possible terror motives for the attack. A police spokesperson said the assailant attacked at 5 locations and was arrested after being shot and wounded. The spokesperson said the man was previously known to police for minor crimes. She added the situation is under control and there are no indications of anyone else's involvement in the attack. In a statement, Prime Minister Stefan Löfven has condemned the heinous incident. China's National Space Administration has released 3 high-resolution images of Mars captured by the Tianwen-1 probe. The images were taken at a distance of up to 350 kilometers above the surface of Mars with a resolution of about 0.7 meters. The Space Administration said these visuals include 3 panchromatic images and 1 color image. The Tianwen-1 spacecraft is currently in a parking orbit of Mars about 223 million kilometers from the Earth. The scientific exploration equipment on the spacecraft has been turned on. It will conduct a detailed survey of the topography, landform, sand, and dust weather in the potential landing zone. While a prototype of the SpaceX Starship rocket SN-10 has exploded after successfully launching and landing vertically, the high-altitude experimental test was conducted in the U.S. state of Texas. Touching down in a vertical position, the SN-10 made it further than the previously tested models. The SN-9 and SN-8 had blown up on their final descent. The video feed provided by SpaceX cut the signal after touchdown, but various fan feeds on social media showed the rocket exploding at the base of the craft. The Starship SN-10 was a test model heavy-lift rocket developed by renowned entrepreneur Elon Musk's private space company. It intended to carry up to 100 tons of cargo and humans on future missions to the Moon and Mars. The cause of the rocket's explosion is still unclear. Paragliders Horacio Lorenz and Rafael Goberna expertly glided around the world's largest fountain at the Point Palm Jumeirah in Dubai. Spaniard Lorenz, a 5-time world champion, and Brazilian Goberna took to the skies defying gravity and performing in unison. The Palm Fountain features 2 floating platforms which cover 14,000 square meters of seawater. It reaches 105 meters high with a display involving 3,000 LED lights that are in sync with hit songs from sunset until midnight. Walt Disney's latest animated movie, Raya and the Last Dragon, aims to offer a fresh take on a princess tale in a fantasy world. The critics have appreciated the film's animation, storytelling, and message. More in this report.
The filmmakers at Walt Disney Animation Studios were faced with a novel challenge. Over 6 years, around 6 different films and storylines were created and screened to test audiences around the characters, but none felt quite right. The final version incorporates characters and themes from all the previous projects. The baddies of the piece are the purple fog creatures who arbitrarily turn people to stone.
You and the dragon are coming with me.
My sword here says we're not.
The plot resonates strongly in today's world, draws its cultural roots from Southeast Asia. The movie features prominent Asian actors in Hollywood, from Kelly Marie Tran, Awkwafina to Gamma Chan, Daniel Day Kim, and Sandra Oh. Awkwafina says she is happy about Hollywood being inclusive. Tran says the vision for the movie is different from what is historically thought of and seen of a Disney princess. Co-director Don Hall says they had been careful during COVID-19 to not sound opportunistic, as the movie features a killer plague virus. The movie is being released on the 5th of March on Disney+.
On to the latest in business. The U.S. has called on Saudi Arabia to renounce its special developing nation status at the World Trade Organization. Washington noted the World Bank designated the G20 member as a high-income country. In a statement to the WTO, Washington said Riyadh is a wealthy and influential player in the global economy. It said the step will allow Saudi Arabia to significantly contribute to ensuring the WTO remains a viable forum for trade talks. The U.S. also asked the Geneva-based trade watchdog to improve the protection of intellectual property. And European Union competition enforcers have cleared a $24 billion French scheme to help pandemic-hit companies via loans. European Commission said the scheme gives a state guarantee to commercial banks on private lending to improve their capital position. The French state guarantee will cover up to 30% of loans and subordinated bonds to be acquired by private investment vehicles. It said these loans and subordinated bonds must be issued before June 30th, 2022, with a maturity of 8 years. Meanwhile, European markets have declined as a rise in bond yields saw jitters return to global stocks once again. London's FTSE shed over 0.5% to lead the losses. The Pan-European Stock 600 and Frankfurt's DAX dropped close to 0.5%. Italy's FTSE MIB and the CAC 40 in Paris have also dipped marginally. Earlier, Asian stocks plummeted following overnight losses at the Wall Street. And it's time now to take a look at the latest weather updates from around the world. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news.